And I will be continuing my coverage of Amber 2011 by looking at a round 5 rapid game between Boris Gelfand and Vladimir Kramnik, two of the strongest players in the world without a doubt. And so let's get started. Kramnik takes things into Nimzo-Indian, and Gelfand sticking with a pretty solid line. He wants to avoid the doubling of his pawns if Black decides to take, which is definitely a theme in the Nimzo, weakening the c4 square, etc. So d5 by Kramnik, pretty logical move, just trying to establish control of the center and establish control of that e4 square. a3, and I like this move by Kramnik, bishop d6. It seems kind of weird, he brought the bishop out earlier to b4 and to threaten that knight, but now that white has played knight to e2, the knight can no longer go to f3, which is a more natural square. And so bishop d6, retaining the bishop square, definitely not a bad idea. So here Gelfand plays c5. And it does gain space temporarily. And I never like this kind of move in any of these positions, because by closing the center, as white has done with c5, he loses a lot of the dynamic potential of the position, and it's going to be tough to defend this pawn. It tends to become more of a weakness than a strength, and when Black plays e5 in the future, which he usually is able to do, he's really going to free up his game, and these pawns in the center for white are going to be a weakness. So b4, continuing with the gain space strategy. b6, just aim to undermine it. Now c6, just kind of taking time. You don't want to see white kind of sneak in a b5 and gain space like that, shutting out these pieces. So c6, kind of a somewhat of a cautious move, maybe some bishop a6 or simply a5 ideas coming up. Bishop b2 is it's a pretty logical play so far. And now Black, pretty much without effort, I think he's achieving a somewhat superior position. And as I was saying earlier, this early advance with the c-pawn, by closing up the position, it's tough for white to get play, because this bishop is pretty terrible on b2. Yes, Black does have something of a weakness on c6, but it's pretty tough for white to attack it. And it looks like the open b-file certainly going to benefit Black more than white, and these pawns are going to be weak in the center. And so, yeah, Black gets mobilized a little bit. Queen d4, he's got to try to hold on to this pawn here. And it looks like maybe white can hold everything together with knight a4, but, Black doesn't have a lot of space. It's a little tough to develop this bishop, but I got to give it, say I prefer Black always in these type of positions, just about. So white does have an impressive battery, with some ideas of some checkmate threats, but with a calm bishop f8, Black is just going to take it a little bit slow and just try to mobilize this piece the best way possible. So here, bishop f8 was kind of sneaky in a rapid game, I guess, because let's say white plays something like this. Well, it looks like he's actually going to be losing a piece. This knight is pretty loose on the edge of the board, so got to take it easy. The rook e4 stuff is definitely an idea, as we'll see. So rook b8 certainly makes sense. Just develop your pieces. This is a fantastic file to take. And the c5 pawn is probably not feeling too great, as well as this e3 pawn. And the knight on a4 is weak as well. So white's got a lot of loose pieces. Black's position is very, very solid, and it doesn't seem that easy for white to really get any play. I mean, yes, he does have some ideas of threats along this diagonal, but it's tough to see a long-term plan, especially with these weaknesses on c5 and e3. So bishop c3 makes sense, trying to consolidate. And rook a1, yeah, I guess you don't want to give up any pawns for free, but never a good sign when white's moves the rook and then 2 moves later he moves it back to a1. So not a good sign. And queen b8, I like this move because Kramnik's playing pretty patiently. He's not trying to go too crazy. He's trying to put his pieces on good squares. He's thoroughly controlling this b file, and because white would definitely like to trade rooks. but not easier said than done, certainly. So rook c1, white's achieved a little bit of regrouping, but this knight on a4 is out of the game. Kramnik exploits this with a pretty nice tactic. I'm sure he was lining this up, and it's pretty easy. As from before, this bishop on f8's doing a good job defending. Black's just going to pick up a pawn here. And he's going to pick up a lot more than just a pawn, because as that knight falls, okay, now the rook is transferred over here. There's pressure on that pawn. Black, it's pretty much whatever he wants. The c5 pawn is going to drop, and with it, there's probably going to be some pressure along this diagonal. This knight's going to be weak. Forget about it. So knight e4 is a good move, and Gelfand, an experienced pro, he calmly replies bishop b4, which is a logical move. I'm sure that's the best move in the position. He doesn't, snatch the piece, and he aims to trade off black's active rook on b3. So bishop b4 is definitely good. Knight g5, yeah, I mean, the idea didn't really work anymore. There's no longer, you're not going to take on a4, so got to move the knight. And rook c3, yeah, fine move. You want to trade off your opponent's active piece. I mean, this rook b3 was definitely a hassle. And also with the move knight g5, black was threatening to take the e3 pawn. So rook c3, takes, and this knight, man, I mean, you just can't, this is over. So bishop c3 is somewhat forced. I guess, queen takes c3 doesn't really make as much sense. I mean, you want to keep something, some threat. So f6 is, it's a good move. I mean, this is always going to be a weak pawn on c5. So black doesn't need to rush it. I really like how Kramnik played patiently in this game. Aside from f6, I probably would have played... I would have wanted to play queen b3. I think. But I don't know, my first thought, but maybe it's not so good. I mean, maybe white just says okay, and you go back. So maybe queen b3 is not so good. f6, yeah, sure, why not? I mean, strengthen the center, neutralize white's really only plus. And king f2, yeah, it's gotta defend. And Kramnik really skillfully exploits the kind of loose position of white's weaknesses on c5 and e3, and even the knight on a4 is kind of looking goofy. So queen c7, yeah, I mean, obviously if you're trying to attack, you don't want to trade pieces. And so what Gelfand does is he's getting attacked, he has a worse position, so he wants to trade pieces, which is logical. You want to neutralize your opponent's attacking potential by just trading off some of his attacking pieces. So queen a5 again, please trade with me, and now black has succeeded in centralizing the queen, and there's some not too pleasant threats along the e-file. So bishop d4 makes sense. I mean, and bishop f5. So black has got some nice centralized and coordinated pieces. The bishop on f8 is not so great, but it's exerting continuous pressure on c5, and it's also doing a great job defending. So now, with rook b8, black is really starting to threaten some not so pleasant invasions along the b-file, not to mention a queen b7 and really starting to penetrate the white position. So white's next few moves are aimed at trading pieces and not getting attacked. But with g4, now he's introducing another weakness. So he's got a weakness here, c5, pawn on e3. Now this pawn on g4 is going to be an object of attack, certainly, and it opens up the white king significantly. Not to mention the pawn on a3 is not so great either. So bishop c2 wants to stay on this square, so white couldn't play rook b1. And back there, so no real difference. Knight takes, better than pawn takes, certainly. The knight's got some better attacking ideas. And white has achieved a significant reduction in material. Small point. Say something like rook e8, trying to keep the pieces on. Maybe white actually gets a little play himself. Start getting pressure on c6 as well. So black just takes it. But here Kramnik mean, he played some very nice maneuvers here. So the knight going to e6. So now we're starting to see, well, Kramnik, first of all, could just take this pawn right now. But it's going to be, he could probably convert him. I mean, Kramnik, that's what he does. He wins a pawn, small advantage, and just wins. But f5 was definitely a better move. I mean, it's going to be kind of tough to convert it. Say we trade some pieces, and all of a sudden we've got opposite colored bishops, and black has, I would guess that white has about as much chance to draw this as black to win. So if you've got a good advantage, why go into that? You know, Kramnik, I mean, yeah, he probably normally would in a long game, but f5 just seems like a great move. So maybe not. And the idea here, white ended up playing knight b3, but let's say takes f5, right? I mean, he's getting something here. The line I was looking at was something about queen h4, and if king g1, white's probably going to lose the house here with something like this and check. Just a guess. Maybe a check first. I don't know. I mean, this is pretty horrible. And so I think king f1 was maybe better. And let's say if knight takes, just a sample line, how the tactics, and knight c2. And, you know, whatever, maybe throw these in. But, I mean, this is this is pretty tough. Just, you know, black is obviously threatening to come in here, and I don't see how white's going to get out of this. I mean, the idea, I thought maybe knight b3 to cover this check, but, I mean, come on. I mean, white can't even, he's not even threatening queen d8 because this queen is covering it. So white has absolutely no threats, really no compensation. I don't see how he's going to possibly hold this. Good luck, you know, against Kramnik as well. So that was kind of the variation of pawn takes. So knight b3 right away, and check. Black infiltrates, and I mean, all the weaknesses in white's position. The queen's way out here. What's it doing? The knight not really doing anything either. So white's king is pretty lonely. This bishop's kind of helping him out, but not so much. And not to mention the c5 pawn is weak, e3 pawn is weak, g4 pawn is weak. White has no counterplay, and you can't just react in these types of situations. Not to mention, Kramnik had about 4 minutes here, Gelfand about 1 minute 30 seconds. So out of a 25-minute game with a 10-second increment, Gelfand's pretty low on time. So queen d2, it's always great to be low on time while you're defending as well. Time pressure certainly helps. Knight h4, it is a little tough for, well, the only piece black can't include in the attack is the bishop here, and it is still attacking the c5 pawn. So knight h4, and a pretty easy maneuver. I mean, black can pretty much take his pick here. Knight g5 looks just fine as well, but the immediate knight g4 force, and I'm assuming, well, first of all, queen g2 doesn't work as a check. Just gonna pick one up. So takes, and after bishop e5, which, yeah, I mean, he wants to get this back and defend, but now this is starting to hang. One position pretty much collapses. And knight g5, well, that's going to threaten mate. And after h4, Gelfand had about 30 seconds here, Kramnik about 3 minutes. Pretty nice win by Kramnik. And after knight f2, Gelfand, I think, is about to lose on time, but the position is hopeless. Black is threatening a pretty nice mate. Let's say something bishop f4, like a normal move, and checkmate. So an excellent game by Kramnik. Him and Gelfand are not having the best tournaments, but this is a tough tournament. I mean, you've got almost all the top 10 players in the world playing, so definitely not an easy one. So this is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and thanks for tuning in.